How do you keep your Java code smaller, reduce boilerplate and verbosity? We'll have a look at lombok library and Java records, discuss when and why should you use which, and what are advantages and possible pitfalls you need to look out for. Lombok is an annotation processor library that enables you to replace common repetitive code, like getters, setters, and constructors, by annotating your codebase with several annotations library provides. Here's an example of lombok getter annotation that for class with one attribute called name gets translated by the annotation processing to getName method. Java records are language feature introduced in JDK 14. Keyword is used instead of class keyword, and they act as immutable data carriers, and they automatically provide getters, canonical constructor to string, equals, and hashcode methods. You may ask, is verbosity and boilerplate really that big of an issue? After all, modern IDEs can generate all Java class necessities with a couple of clicks. Let me open another class. It seems similar to previous example. But have you noticed that getter for toggle is negated? In electrical engineering, they measure effectiveness of desired signal to the level of background noise by using signal-to-noise ratio. You could argue that code for normal Java class has more noise than signal, as we saw in the previous example. You don't know, is the class just defining normal getters and setters, or is it something you should pay more attention to? So the problem of verbosity is not writing code, it's really reading and understanding code intention. Let's first talk about what lombok is, how you use it, and how it reduces verbosity of Java code. Lombok continues with the Indonesian naming theme in the Java ecosystem. Java is an Indonesian island, Java Enterprise Edition recently moved to Jakarta package, and Jakarta is Indonesia's capital, and Lombok is also Indonesian island. Lombok is also the name for pepper seeds that come from that area, so the Project Lombok moniker is spicing up your Java. Lombok is a library that you can add as a dependency to your Java projects. Spring Initializer also includes it as an option when creating projects. Lombok runs as an annotation processor. Java compiler will load every processor it finds in meta, inf, services, processor, and Lombok jar has one. This is the way Lombok hooks up into code transformation process, which interprets your annotations and generates code based on them. It's a cyclical process. To generate the code, you want to know about the code, in example which annotations it contains. Then you generate new code and interpret it again, which starts the new cycle. When developing, you'll need to make your IDE aware of the transformation Lombok makes. Let's see how to add support for Lombok in IntelliJ, Eclipse, and Visual Studio Code. Support for Lombok comes bundled in IntelliJ as an IntelliJ Lombok plugin. Just make sure you have the plugin enabled. When you first try to run the project that has Lombok added as dependency, IntelliJ should automatically ask you do you want the annotation processing enabled, which you should confirm. If for some reason IntelliJ didn't present you with a pop-up, the same setting can be found under Build, Execution Deployment, Compiler, Annotation Processors, and you need to enable annotation processing, and click OK. To install Lombok support for Eclipse, we'll need to go to Project Lombok site, projectlombok.org, to install to Eclipse part. There we'll find the update site URL we'll need to add to Eclipse to our help install new software part. We'll add an URL, say it's for Lombok, and then we should have Lombok installer offered to us, and we'll click next, install Lombok, and click finish. You'll get a warning asking you, do you trust the certificate? Just click yes and always trust this content, and that should be enough. That should install the Lombok and ask you to restart your Eclipse, and I have found besides this restart now button you'll need to restart it manually once more. If the installation went correctly, in your help about section on the bottom you should see Lombok is installed. And also you shouldn't get any errors in your IDE, and if you mouse over any Lombok annotations you should see a documentation pop-up. For Microsoft Visual Studio Code, Lombok is enabled via the plugin you'll need to install. after which you'll be able to see documentations for lombok annotations. Let's see an example of what lombok can do for us. Here we have a simple class with one field that has getters, setters, default constructor, all R constructor, equals and hash code implemented. Let's first replace default constructor. We'll use lombok annotation no R constructor and safely delete default constructor. If you are ever wondering what lombok annotation has done, you can always go to refactor and delombok it. In other words, return the code that would be present in the Java class if lombok annotation wasn't present. In this case, we get our default constructor back. The fact that you can delombok your code means that there's no danger in using lombok, as you can always return your Java code to the normal version without lombok annotations. We want to use lombok, so let's return no R constructor and safely delete default constructor. Next, let's replace all R constructor by using lombok all R constructor annotation, and we can safely delete all R constructor we had before. Next, let's replace getters and setters by using getter and setter lombok annotation. And we can get rid of get username and set username. Next, we can get rid of toString and we'll use lombok toString annotation. And finally, we can get rid of equals and hash code by using equals and hash code lombok annotation. Equals and hash code, toString, getter, setter, and all R constructor are so common that lombok offers union annotations for all of them, and it's at data. On the left side there's the code before lombok annotations, and on the right side we see what it was reduced to. Pretty sweet. Since we plan to use this class as a JPA entity and no R constructor provides the default constructor which should only be used internally by persistence framework, we can mark that by saying that the access level is private. A word of caution, lombok and JPA don't play well in case of toString implementation when you have relationship annotations like one-to-many. It might give you infinite loop and break your app. To solve that, you can tell lombok to exclude certain attributes from toString implementation. So you say add toString, exclude. Sometimes you might have a class with lots of attributes that might be unwieldy to construct by using normal constructor. You can provide builder pattern to ease up object creation by using add builder annotation. And we'll replace the normal constructor with the builder pattern. You might use static loggers in your classes to log certain information in your methods. Instead of instantiating static loggers in your every class, you can replace that by using one of the logger annotation lombok provides, let's say log4j2. In Spring Framework, you might have components that use constructor injection to create instances in a case of private final fields. You can get rid of the constructor and the private final and use add value annotation instead. That makes the code much cleaner. Lombok add value annotation is similar to Java record in the functionality it provides. It includes private final fields, getters, constructor, toString, equals and hash code. In fact, you can replace this service class with a record and get rid of the lombok add value annotation, and the code would work. So should you do that? Well, no. I should be more precise and say no in this example. Official documentation describes records as compact syntax for declaring classes which are transparent holders for shallowly immutable data. Let's deconstruct what that statement means. First, shallowly immutable means that if class has fields, these fields are treated as being final. However, their fields, meaning fields of the fields, don't need to be final. Records' primary goal is not boilerplate reduction, but they have semantic goal, modeling data as data. That's why in our service example, Although we could, it's not appropriate to use record, because service is not meant to be holder for data. Records are considered as nominal form of tuples. In other words, record pair, which has integer x and y, and record range, which has integer low and high, are not just aggregate types of two integers. If that was the case, they would be structural tuples. For records, naming matters, and they are not the same, even though their attributes are, which we can test as well. And our test confirms that they are indeed not the same. So, records should be used as data carriers and hold semantic meaning, whereas lombok just generates code and has no semantics attached. Good use case for using records is for data transfer objects. So, they can replace lombok add-value annotation in certain cases, but certainly not all. Lombok and records work well together and are not meant to replace each other. In fact, if you have a record with lots of attributes, you may annotate it with add-builder lombok annotation to provide easier construction of instances. To conclude, both lombok and records are welcome addition to any Java project, and you should include and use them to keep your code base smaller, cleaner, and easier to read and maintain.